Okay, so we'll start with the authors talking a bit about each of their books, and they'll talk about their journey, and then you all can start asking them questions about their books and about how they got published.
Hello, everybody. I'm Karena de Souza, and thank you very much for having me on this panel. Really enjoyed being here in Goa and enjoying this event. My book is Contours of Courageous Parenting, and it's a book I never thought I'd end up writing. But it actually ties so well. Once you hear the stories of all these ladies, it actually ties so well with the story of everybody else. It's a little bit of a travel story, a little bit about food, but very much about how we raise our children. So I am a futurist. I talk about the future of work. And one of the things I'm really interested in is how we will raise our children right now, given that we don't know what the future is going to hold. And I'm actually going to just start off by reading a little bit out of the book to kind of give you context. So I was at a conference with UNESCO's Futures Literacy. And the conversation we were having was, how does the future of work impact our choices about education right now? So how does the future of work discussion affect parenting? What is our responsibility to the generations of the future, I wondered, chatting with Isabel. Alongside Gabrielle Rizzo as lead, Isabel Chapuri was facilitating a vibrant discussion on the possible future of education for the UNESCO's Futures Literacy Summit. What should education look like to prepare and serve the leaders of 2030, 2050, and 2070, they asked. I thought about that. That means that the prime ministers of 2050 and 2070 are actually sitting at our dinner tables right now. They're in kindergarten and high school. So that gives us a lot of responsibility. We are raising the leaders, whether they choose to lead nations, corporations, or the neighborhood environmental club. Well, that puts a whole different spin on the old quote I said to Isabel, "The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world." She'd never heard that one growing up in Switzerland. But being a parent herself, the gravity resonated. It takes courageous parents to raise the ones who will be leading the world in 2070, she said, because boy, the world will be very different. And that is pretty much the theme of my book. It talks about decision making, how in a world where we cannot predict what the technology will be 50 years from now, do we offer our children the tools that they will need in order to be constantly learning, to have the courage, to be able to step into whatever decisions might be facing them in the future. It is a book that also incorporates a little bit about travel. So 20 years ago, I was here with my 3 young children. We were in Saligao for 4 months, and the idea behind the journey was to have them connect with family, connect with culture, connect with cooking, connect with all the things that matter to them. In the end, we traveled for a full year. And what I ended up doing was borrowing stories from that trip in order to illustrate the various parts of decision making and showing how we as parents can actually use little elements within our lives. You don't have to do something as fancy as traveling around the world for a year, but how do you use those various elements to be able to offer your child gradually peter out that thread, that rope, to give them the courage to be able to do more and more themselves. I often think that, when I had them within me, there was an umbilical cord and they were nicely cocooned within me, and there was this little rope. And as they grow, I kind of feed out the rope and give them more and more tether. I'm still here, but the more I give them rope, the higher they can fly. And that's essentially the...
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Because I've been told that I'm a very softly spoken person. To start with, I'd like to say thank you. They're not here, though. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to Vivek and Dr. Pushkar, who gave me an opportunity to talk here. So my book is aptly called Antarctica to Zimbabwe. The book is about my extensive travels covering the alphabet and amounting to 131 countries that I've been to. I'm a passionate traveler. My travel has taken me to some of the off-beaten path, like the Khyber Pass in Pakistan, as a lone woman. And I've done a few daring and dangerous adventures, and I've had a few near misses, but I'm here to tell the tale. The book also contains a lot of, most of the wonders of the world, because I'm fascinated by wonders of the world, whether they're old or new, or ancient, or man-made, or naturally formed over the years. It contains a lot of things there. One of the reason for calling it Antarctica to Zimbabwe is that, and it wasn't, my trip to Antarctica was in 2017, but before that, I had started writing a book almost 20 years back, 2 decades back. The book was going to be called Around the World with 8 Spices. But just a year after that trip, I took a year out and I did South Africa, Australasia, Latin America, and people told me there maybe I should write a book, because I carried the spices and I used to cook for the host families who invited me for in the hostels, and everybody suggested. One of my brother was always encouraging me to write. So I thought, the immediate thought was that I'm going to write a book as soon as I finish a year travel and call it Around the World with 8 Spices. Then the year after, I decided not to go back to work. I took a year out from work to travel, but I just love traveling. I love being in the hot countries. So, and then it was just at the time that I saw a brochure for this lovely apartment here in Dona Paula. So 2004, I moved, and I'm in Dona Paula. It's a sea-facing apartment, although I've lost the view now. So my idea was that I'll use the tranquility and write the book. But the never-ending festivities of Goa have kept me so busy, I never got around to doing it. But at the same time, I carried on traveling from Goa to places which are closer to get from here, like a lot of Asian countries, Middle East, Uzbekistan, and the Indian Ocean islands. So while I was here, I just carried on traveling. And then the 6 months I lived in Nottingham, in the Midlands in the UK. And that is when, again, I carried on traveling to Europe and places that were easy to go, the Caribbean, a lot of recent Caribbean cruises, and a lot of travel from there. Then I thought, I'm going to wait till now the book 8 Spices is not going to be relevant. So I thought, I'm going to call it Antarctica to Zimbabwe once I've been, because I've done a lot of Africa. Once I've been to Antarctica, and I did the trip in 2017. My interest wasn't just to tick the 7th continent or see the last frontier, which was a lot of people who do that. But in the 90s, I worked for a government company called British Antarctic Survey. And as a scientist, I did a lot of research into Antarctica. And that really got me interested. In fact, the reason for taking the job at that company was I can get a trip down south. Unfortunately, I was with the company for 5 years, and it didn't work out due to my personal reasons. And then when I moved to Goa, I found out the Indian Antarctic Center is in Goa, of all the places, just around the corner in Vasco. So I had a day there, and again, I hinted strongly that, I'd really like to have a trip down south. And to my pleasant surprise, it was offered to me. But again, that was the year I actually moved to Goa, and I didn't have time to go back to UK and prepare for my talk, so it never materialized. And then,
I think,
yeah? Is my time up?
Yeah, almost.
Okay, so just briefly to end up, I know I do get carried away, so do ask questions if you got any questions here, or I'll be in the reception.
So
The
what
book
we'll
is a
do
coffee
is,
table book.
sorry to interrupt, what we'll do is now, as every writer introduces their book, let them continue, next is you, and then you all can come back and ask them questions about their books.
Sure.
So,
Good afternoon, friends. I think it's easy for me. It was easy for me to write the book, then address you guys. I'm really nervous.
It's okay, we all are.
All right, it's a journey from a housewife to a author. I'm the author of this, The Taste of Happiness, which is a coffee table book. And the idea behind this coffee table book is, as we all get married, whatever we study, like I've done law 2 times, reached the 3rd year, never answered. So everything has been like incomplete. So as my children left the roost, and I suddenly felt this time really heavy on my hands, and I've been a multitasker, I've been pretty talented in all my fields, be it a photography or cooking or storytelling. I remember once meeting the principal of Salgaonkar College of Hotel Management, Professor Mirza, and he happened to ask me, Aysha, what are you doing these days? And I didn't know what to say. I said, sir, I'm going to write a book. So every time I started writing, and I started clicking pictures for this, and I wanted to stop, I remembered my promise to him, and I went ahead. And after I completed this self-published book of mine, the first copy went to Professor Mirza. And what he did was, though he didn't read the content, he belonging to the catering industry, he cooked one of these biryanis. It's a collection of 12 biryanis from my family, from a family heritage. So he cooked one of the biryanis and he served to the entire college. And that was such a sweet gesture, So this book has got the recipes of 12 biryanis, stories from my childhood, because the house that was where I grew up belonged to some governor of some Portugal governor, huge place. And the life that I saw was only through my parents. I was not really allowed to see the outside world. And the pictures have been clicked around Goa with snippets, and I'm a history student, ultimately a graduate. So history of Goa here and there, like the sluice gates, the manshi prawns, and the fish biryani. So it's a very cute looking book, and I've designed it myself. And this is the picture of my old house. And this
Show
is,
us the book. Open it and show.
I would have loved to read it, but I think we are running short of time.
Can you show? Should I?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. Whoever has photographs and all. Yeah. All the photographs have been clicked by me. Wait. This is a food photography of Masoor biryani, Masoor keema biryani. And a few around Goa, like I used to go visit the fields and click pictures of the fields. Yeah. It's a beautiful book. I think one must have it, and it's available on Amazon. Where's this picture taken? This Taligaon fields. I've written about the Taligaon fields. There are Raya fields. There is some fields which I came across passing Werner. Yeah, thank you so much. So this is it.
Congratulations. Joe Alvares here. I'm a jazz rock ambassador for India, jazz vocalist. I sing all over the world for the government of India. And I've been a musician from the 70s, but I also wear a history hat and pursued a doctorate study with Heras Institute for over 25 years, of course, which I have not yet completed. I have authored 2 major books, one on Bhopal called Echoes of an Era. I printed 400 copies. My daughter is married into the royal family of Bhopal, and therefore I started going to Bhopal. I fell in love with the city, its antiquity, the history of the royal family, and the palaces and the terra firma of Bhopal. And I wrote a book on Bhopal, including Sanchi, Bhimbetka, Bhojpur, Udaygiri. These are major UNESCO World Heritage Sites that I profiled in the book, including the history of the Begums. And the model, inspiration was Bhopal, because daughter married in the royal family, love of history. I got an industrialist in Bhopal to spend 20 lakhs on the production of the book as a CSR initiative. We printed 500 copies. I sold 400 copies in about 3 months at 4,000 rupees. Not from a bookshop, personally, on the phone, with my contacts, we did universities, I did hotel industry, I did individual contacts from the music world, socialites, and all that kind of thing. Finally, the government of India bought 135 copies for all the embassies in the world. So Bhopal is already sitting with that. Then, I come from Thane, 35 kilometers away from Bombay. I grew up as a young boy looking at the fields and the forts and the palaces and the agyaris and the temples and the churches, and I wondered how this all came into being. And I joined the Heras Institute under Father Joe Vilenkar, who's just passed away. He was my guide, and studied Western Coast with specific reference on Thane, Sopara, Kalyan, early ports. My first inspiration came from a biblical mention of Solomon's ships coming to Ophir when he was building the Temple of Jerusalem for goods, importing goods from India. Ophir, according to 90% of the world's historians, is Nala Sopara, 12 kilometers down the Thana Creek near Thane. So my book starts from King Solomon's court, showing about 10 or 12 world travelers that came from the 1st century, their reports, including the report of the great Marco Polo, who came to Thane in 1290 AD on a rainy night and described the town as a very prestigious port that had exports that reached even Rome, over through Istanbul to Greece and to Rome. The port of Thane has been profiled, the port of Kalyan, early ports. This is a book that finally, project, I got a lover of Thane, a young industrialist, a Christian gentleman, Rohan Pereira. This book cost 20 lakhs to produce. As soon as he saw my research, he said, Joe, I'll back this. He spent 20 lakhs, so I got another sponsor to bring this out. And now this book has been released by a Supreme Court judge, Dr. Vinay Shastrabudhe, who's one of Modi's closest advisors. He's the president of the ICCR. He was vice president of the BJP National before the current one. And they loved this chronicling of a town that was normally called a dormitory town by the British. This is 2,300 years of continuous research on the Thana coast and the cities, and it's making quite a mark with the intellectuals, the intelligentsia. I have sold a lot to the Taj, to the Marriott, because they loved this work. They're building hotels everywhere. They say our foreign guests would love to see this, and the byproduct of that is to promote the town. And so I'm having the first walking tour of foreigners from the Taj and Marriott in Thane on the 3rd of March. And that's my dream, to promote the town as an international city. Then I'm working with UNESCO to get the Thana Church, St. John the Baptist, built in 1560 by Franciscans, and a Shivalaya temple in Amarnath that was built in 960 AD to be UNESCO sites. Once that is done, the town will automatically be uplifted. So this is the process. This was the dream as a childhood, living in Thane. I now stay in Bandra, which is on the same island, Salsette Island. Thana and Bandra on the same landmass. And I got finance for this. I sell directly. I don't need bookshelves, because nobody can sell a coffee table book of 5,000 rupees the way I do, because I have a focused clientele. I know where the books need to go. I love to meet the buyer. I have interviews with them. It's a piece of work that comes from my heart, not from my intellect. And I did the necessary walking to create these products, and they have gone down very well with, the Navy now. I met the Chief of the Navy, Admiral Tripathi. He said, I'll put these books on every naval ship. And so it's making its waves. And I have been encouraged by my circumstantial background of being a jazz rock ambassador for the country. And therefore I had inroads into sponsors, into ability to sell, a great contact base. And I think it's great to have self-dependency for stuff like this. It's not a mass product, it's a class product. So that's it.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah. So
600. Yeah.
So Joe will give us a roadmap how to market, but we'll get back to him later. First, let's start with Aruna. So Antarctica to Zimbabwe, what a journey. So many places you visited. Why don't you tell us how was it for you as a single woman? I'm assuming you traveled alone. How was it for you to travel through all these places, and were there any instances where you were scared or something very interesting, something unusual that happened that you can tell our viewers? Take the.
Oh, right. Okay, the travel has been from my childhood. I was 14 years old, but even before that, I had a few journeys in Africa. By the way, I was born in Uganda, in Chincha. So I started with the best of three worlds, actually. Because I was born in Uganda, then brought up in England. I did my education, my employment in England. And now for the last 20 years, I'm in Goa, partly in the UK. So that was an encouragement from the very start. My father took me on a round trip of Uganda on the dirt roads. I mean, this is when I was 14, many years back, many years back. And that really gave me the travel bug, the wings to fly, and I always wanted to travel, so I carried on traveling. So my initial travel was with family and friends and cousins, but in the later life, I did a lot of solo trips. Solo trips you can do when you want, how you want, which I quite like. And so one of the reasons for writing the book was to share my experiences with people, especially single, older women who may want to travel, who may want to be adventurous but lack the confidence. And I just wanted to inspire the women to travel and travel solo as well. It's not as difficult or dangerous as people think.
Okay.
Talking of a
Something
daring
interesting,
place.
some memory that kind
Oh
of
yeah, a
stands
lot
out.
of. So I started with my childhood because she was born in Uganda. So I'll give an incident of Uganda because I've had lots of encounters with wildlife. So when I was about 10, we were going to, people from Uganda or people will know, Murchison Falls. And we always used to go in, it was a convoy of 3 cars with my father and my 2 uncles. And we were just going for a day trip, so we left early in the morning after sunrise and was supposed to return after sunset. And all of a sudden, a huge herd of elephants just gathered around the cars. And my father had warned us that if this should happen, we have to turn the engine off and sit very quietly. And I was 10, but I had a cousin younger than me. So we sat there for hours and hours. There was no air conditioning in those days. It was extremely hot. We were hungry, but we couldn't get the food out, we had to deter the animals. And we just sat for so long. They finally retreated, the herd retreated. But that was a scary time. And our car was the first one. I was sitting in the front. But I survived that. And then again, there was another incident in Tanzania when I went to Serengeti, Ngorongoro crater, and I always loved taking photos. So this book has got 1,130 photos. So I was taking a photo from the roof, from the hatch. The guide told me not to stick my head out, just a quick photo, but I just stood there all the time. And again, there was a herd of another animals, but some elephants as well. So he had to swerve the car and go off the track. I was wearing a sleeveless dress then, so I had really deep cuts from my shoulders, my shoulder, my ear, my chin, and the worst one was right under my eye. I was bleeding, but I was still using a hanky. And carried on taking a photo of the setting sun. It was only when I got to the lodge that night, I saw how close and how deep the scar was. I thought I could have lost my sight, but I haven't. And the scar faded after a while. And now it's only the wrinkles.
So much for pursuing a good photograph.
Yeah,
Put your life in danger.
Which is, yeah. And there's one trip which I did after the book, because a trip that was booked twice, and it had to be cancelled because of the lockdown. So I went to Botswana, Botswana and Namibia, which was my recent trip. And this is just using my ordinary camera. There's no fancy SLR cameras, but I've captured some wildlife. And because it's now not in the book, I have so I've inserted. If people want to get the book today, I'll be in the reception. It'll be at a discounted rate today. And it's a 360-page coffee table book, international standard. So please feel free to,
Yeah, you
to
can
get the book.
tell them where
Oh,
it
yeah,
will
see,
be available.
Okay, right. So I think I started saying that, but I couldn't finish because I do get carried away. Antarctica was my dream trip. The reason why I took the job with British Antarctic Survey is to go down. And then here at Indian Antarctic, I couldn't. So I finally did it on my own on an expedition, which was in 2017. Antarctica is, for me, like I said, I worked with the scientists. I've done a lot of research on marine life sciences, freshwater. It's not just the penguins. When you think of Antarctica, people think of penguins, but there were albatross and little squid, a few little things. There's not a lot grows there. So that trip took a long time, but I had a lot of preparations to do. I had to book the trip a year in advance with 20% deposit, non-refundable, thorough medical check. 3 months before the trip, and then 2 weeks before the trip, I had to have infinite amount of travel insurance, because if something goes wrong, they have to bring you back to by helicopter or something. So going was a lot of preparation. Also, I've been in Goa for quite a few years, so I had nothing, no warm clothing. I had to go out and buy socks and hats and scarf. And so that was a preparation. But once I went there, it was extremely interesting. As you know, it's just like a white laboratory. There's no permanent buildings there. I mean, now they may have certain. So it's just for research. And a lot of countries now have 50 at the time, I think, when I went, have bases there. So it doesn't belong to anybody. It's no government. We have an Antarctic treaty, which was formed in 1959. So a country who's got bases there have a right to say things. And we have to be very strict about what the treaty says. But they were just laboratories, and they pack it up and come back. Antarctica is the driest, the highest, the most remote continent. But it was, for me, it was very interesting. And when I took the trip, I took a trip that, it's a long way to go, so I took a 3-week trip. It takes about a week to get there. The way I did it, a week to come back and a week in Antarctica. Not right at the South Pole, because the Antarctic bases were in the Antarctic Peninsula. But it was very interesting. I started from Montevideo in Uruguay. That's where I embarked the ship. It was a Norwegian cruise liner, an icebreaker, but pretty comfortable inside. But obviously then you have to take the Zodiac and go out into Antarctic bases. And that's where the cold and the fear and the extremely rough sea was, but it was an experience. So it started from Montevideo, went down to the Argentinian Patagonia, and then the Falkland Islands, Cape Horn, and then returned from Chilean Patagonia. I saw the Chilean glacier, and it was just, the whole trip was extremely interesting.
What were the temperatures like?
Sorry, wrong time to have the dry cough. I went this for a couple of days. The temperatures right at the South Pole, where the Americans, any Americans here, they go for the biggest thing. So they've got a base right at the south. That's where the minimum temperature is minus 10 degrees. The maximum recorded temperature at the time when I did the research was minus 89. When I went, it was, I chose a place, time when I could go just before Goa, just after Goa, it was just before Goa. So it wasn't, the ship was really, really good, comfortable. So it was cold. We had to have loads and loads of layers of clothing. So it was like thermal, thermal underclothes and layers on the, but because I get hot very easily, so I had warm t-shirts and all sweatproof stuff and jumpers and a lot of things on top. And then you have to have a whole bodysuit. For the legs, you have thermals, and then you have the wet trousers. Then you have a bodysuit. Now this bodysuit, people who've been on the cruises will know that you get a life jacket. And this was a bodysuit that you have to lie down and put that in because it covers your feet, covers your every head to toe. Because if you don't die of drowning, if there is an emergency, you die of hypothermia. It's pretty cold. So there was a lot of preparations, but it was a very, very interesting, and I've ticked my dream
Okay,
list.
thank you, Aruna.
Yeah.
Now we move to you, Karina. First of all, we didn't know you all were mother-daughters. You all didn't say that.
Oh, no, we're not.
You're not?
We're both born in Uganda.
Okay, sorry.
And so it's like I
No,
noticed a
thought
connection
because
with
she
her.
kept looking at you and you kind of knew what she was saying. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, but yeah.
To choose which country. Yeah. So I thought I'd start with Uganda.
Thank you,
Okay,
thank you.
So why don't you, so how old are your kids now?
My kids are now 23, 25, and 27. So this, the trip was 20 years ago.
So isn't it time for another book now?
Oh no, this one was written recently, and
Okay,
actually I am
okay,
writing a new book.
okay.
The book that I was writing and am still writing is called Ripple. So it's called basically on roots, which is R-O-U-T-E-S, roots, R-O-O-T-S, and ripples. So basically talking about the journey, talking about how our children ended up connecting with the various parts of their roots, their cultural roots, their family roots, cooking. One of the reasons we actually started the trip was because my oldest son was wasting rice in North America, and I needed to tell him how long it takes to grow a grain of rice. And that whole conversation was actually the genesis for this entire trip. So I feel very connected to your book, the Biryani. But yes, and so I'm still writing that book. It'll probably be published later this year or next year. But yes, and it's been wonderful to watch the ripple effect of the trip on my 3 children. So the ripple is how it's actually changed the fabric of our family, how our traditions have changed, and also watching how our 3 children have incorporated the journey into their own lives, their appetite for travel, particularly their appetite, and this comes into the decision making, their appetite for making critical decisions. I find them really on the edge of making really interesting choices I would not have made as their parent, and having the confidence as a parent to sit back and say, you know what, that is not the choice I would have made, but I understand your thought process, I think takes a lot of courage as a parent. There's a lot that went into the title.
So is your book available now for people to pick up?
It's not available here.
Okay.
I actually published it as an ebook and a paper copy, but being self-published, I do keynote speeches on the future of work all over.
Okay.
And it has a global audience as an ebook because people can pick it up, South America, South Africa, all the way through to Japan.
People can they can download your ebook. Is
Absolutely.
it available on Amazon?
On Amazon, and you can actually get the paper book. I'm actually working on with a printer here in Goa, so if people are interested, I'll add to the number of copies I'm printing. So do let me know. And yes, in terms of the self-publishing, one of the lessons I learned was that when you publish with color, the price goes up. So really interesting. So this one is published black and white, but my sister has the one. I published a few copies in color for family because that's obviously much richer. It has all our photographs from our trip, and we actually went to Kenya for our safari, because my husband's from Kenya. We climbed the Himalayas with the 3 children, used Sherpas to carry the children so that they could make the journey. We've done the Great Barrier Reef, so it actually has quite a nice slew of photographs in there, along with the stories.
Alicia. Yeah. Aisha. Yeah, so what has been your journey with your book? You have been marketing it?
I've been cheated by publication houses,
Okay, that's...
especially the Delhi ones, after
Okay.
taking a real huge lump sum from me.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to be really wise. You need to talk to them time and again. You need to basically have a relationship with the woman or the man you're talking to, and then decide exactly as to what you want in life.
Okay.
You know, and the journey has been like she said, colored pages are expensive. So this is like priced at 1,500 rupees. There's hardly anything coming, but you know,
Yeah.
it's a hard book cover. I did it mainly because of the photography and the recipes.
Yeah, with
And it's a
food-
coffee
with-
table
yes,
collection,
with,
you know.
Books on food, you have to show the images.
Yeah.
So, any reason why you didn't go with a Goan publisher? Didn't try to-
They're too expensive, whereas the ones in Bangalore are better.
Okay,
You know, I did it with Clever Fox. They were really nice
Okay.
and very reasonable.
okay. And how do you market your books? Are they available at bookshops?
They're available on Amazon,
Okay.
Flipkart, and another site. That's it. I want to keep some at Broadway too.
Okay, okay.
I've just started it. It was launched recently at the Delhi Book Fair.
All right, all right.
So-
So you're just like a freshly minted author.
Freshly.
Okay.
I want to come up with more volumes because this is just biryanis and pulaus.
Okay.
Next will be some seafood.
All right.
And then I'll go on and on because we are eaters. We love to
Yes.
eat.
Now, Joe, over to you. So, give us like a 101 in marketing, because what you've done is fantastic. You've used your experience as a jazz musician to make inroads, like you said. So you have a band of fans already. You have a band of supporters.
That's the
who
circumstantial part.
they'll do anything for Joe. So you write a book, you publish it, they will buy it at whatever cost. So how now that's an advantage you have. How would an upcoming author who doesn't have the kind of background that you have, how would you advise him to go about in self-publishing?
Yeah,
How does he
okay.
build an image, for instance?
Yeah, okay.
I mean, you have an image. We can look at you and say you already here.
No, that's
Your
another
image has
story.
come before you.
That's my circumstantial disposition that I capitalized on what I do as a musician. But the first thing is to select a topic of great interest to the reader and to your heart. So I'm into history of India, and being research-based, it's always a story of discovery. There's no opinion. There is research, there are hard facts. It's the purview of a research scholar to go into libraries, travel the world, seek original documents and all that kind of thing to make things happen. So select a classic topic that would be fresh, of interest to the market that you are looking at. So I looked at a high-end market because I knew what kind of book I wanted to do, what kind of pricing I want to have. The price has got nothing to do with the ROI on filling my pocket. It's a 25-year-old research product. It's the first of its kind on that region, and therefore justifies a certain price. And so you look first to select a great topic that interests the market that you want to reach. Deal with your heart and head and talk to your God, because without prayer, these products don't happen. At least as a rock musician doing history, nobody dreamed of that. But it's the prayer life. Select a good topic. Then, now there is CSR, industrialists. Every industry has to devote 2% of its profits to various causes. It could be medical, research, music, whatever you like. If you are able to have a contact capability with industry, with a private individual. Like this guy sponsored 20 lakhs for the book. He's one guy, modern India, this is modern India, 42 years old, one laptop, no employees, he has 100 crore turnover, doing solutions for banks all over the world. Very private. But I knew him, and he was from Thane. And, you know, I said, Rohan, you know, I need a sponsor because I'm not going to spend for this. So I found a sponsor. Even for my Bhopal book, I found an industrialist in Bhopal that loved his city and discussed with me how I would write this book to obliterate the experience of the gas tragedy, and therefore what I would plan for that book and how I will elevate that region with the fact and the historicity with which it's so actually powerfully famous. Like for example, I went to the Bhimbetka 40,000-year-old cave paintings. Yes. And the latest discovery in Bhimbetka, which I'm saying, part of the studies, are discoveries all the time. Bhimbetka, suddenly they discovered a fossil called the Dickinsonia fossil that is 500 million years old. This was discovered after COVID. That gave credence to the Gondwana story of the continent crashing into the Eurasian plate and forming the Himalayas. For me and for archaeological survey and for geological survey, this was a major discovery, which has not yet come out in the commercial writings of those areas. So that was a discovery. In Bhopal, I discovered the royal family of Napoleon, the 16th of France. His closest relative, who's meant to be the king of France, is sitting in Bhopal.
Is that a myth or is that
No,
real?
no, that's a reality.
Okay.
He had a cousin,
Okay.
and that guy he murdered somebody in France in the 16th century, and he was asked to leave, and he ended up in the court of Akbar. And his generations became administrators with the Mughal rulers, and they were posted finally in the 1800s at Bhopal, where the Begums of Bhopal invited the Bourbon, they are the Bourbon family. They helped to administer to Bhopal under the 4 Begums that ruled. And every palace in Bhopal has the fleur de lis, which is a sign of the European family. So I traced this family, for my own reasons, to a little koti in the old Bhopal thing. And then we discovered that the royal families of Europe, if they come to India, they first go to this Bourbon sitting there and acknowledge him as if France had to have a king. He's sitting in Bhopal. I've seen photographs with the dukes of all of Europe and royal families coming to visit this guy that even Bhopal doesn't know of.
Wow.
So I discovered this for myself, and then in the book.
Okay.
And I discovered during the World War, there were about 60,000 prisoners that were sent via India to go to Australia. 20,000 in Dehradun, 10,000 in Delhi. There were 5,000 Italians in Bhopal, and Hitler knew about this and used to announce on his radio threats to bomb Bhopal because of these 5,000 Italian prisoners of war. And they used to have practices for air raids and stuff like that. Now, there's a big graveyard in Bhopal where about 500 of them died over time. But all the houses, rich houses in Bhopal, have paintings from these prisoners. The Nawab of Bhopal, who used to come to Bombay to do ballroom dancing in the Taj Mahal Hotel, finally developed a jazz band from among the Italian prisoners and used to have great balls in Bhopal. So they never came anymore to Bombay. That was another discovery, the Italians in Bhopal, stuff like that. On my Thana story, I discovered so much absolute discovery. Marco Polo, who would think greatest traveler in the world at that time would land at Thana port in 1290 and write about the richness of the town? It's a discovery. It's known to research people, but not to the general public. Then the 1321, the martyrs of Thane, 4 Spanish priests that came to the Thana coast, debated under a Muslim governor about Christ and Muhammad. And these 4 priests were killed publicly in front of the court, decapitated. And they found Christians in Thane, Nestorians, long before the Portuguese came. Portuguese came 1535 and started their conversion processes. But Thana had Nestorians written about in original documents which are in the Vatican, Friar Odoric and Friar Jordanus. They describe this whole stuff about Christians in Thane. Then when I further researched, I found Christians, early Christians in Thane and Jews in Thane, 70 AD, when Jerusalem burnt. They fled in all directions.
Okay, Joe, I think we have to, are you,
Amen. I'm okay, man.
Okay.
You stop me wherever I want.
okay, you have something? Yeah. Yeah. Just give her the,
You got half minute?
give her the mic.
Oh.
mic.
Friends, this is just not a recipe book, but it's also a book for storytellers. And yeah, and for the ones who don't know to cook, I'm just a call away.
And any last lines from anyone? Last thoughts?
From my perspective, self-publishing has been a great way to extend my voice. And I've always had a newsletter. I've been able to build up my audience that way. I've been speaking at corporate levels and into schools and universities. So I think in today's world, it's really interesting, you know, as young people, particularly, I'm looking at all the Gen Z in the audience here, it is very easy to talk to people. You might not feel like you have anything to say. But what I've chosen to do, what I realized from all the questions that were being asked of me at various presentations, in my case, most people, there are many parents in the audience, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a teacher, a good quarter of my audience were parents, and so I spoke to them. What you do is you end up writing for the one person in 8 billion who needs to hear what you have to say in the way that you have to say it. It's not that you're saying anything different, it's just that is the way you're communicating your message. And so if you need the confidence to write, I'm giving it to you.
Quickly.
Great. Somewhere on the talk, I mentioned that I started the thought of writing a book. I even got the cover for the book which was going to be called Around the World with 8 Spices 20 years back. But it actually took the pandemic because I just never got around to writing. So I was March 2020, and I was stuck after I visited a friend. I was stuck in Goa, and I couldn't get back to UK for several months. And that is when I thought it was definitely time to write. So I got my old daily diaries, my travel diaries, and I started writing, making notes for the book. When I finally got back to the UK, I carried on doing the same things. And so the 3 years of lockdowns, 20, 21, 22, when I had to have a sudden pause in my travel, that is when I sat and wrote the book. So in a way, for me, it was a little blessing in disguise.
Okay. So last to Joe, and then we end because the next session is going to start and the people are already here.
So the formula for doing this is that identify your subject, identify your target audience, identify a sponsor, because CSR allows for all kinds of expenses. And once you have these 3 things in place, I struck a deal with my sponsor who took 100 copies as a kickback for investing that money, and I sell 500 and keep that money. So it's a fair deal. I know where I want to sell. I don't have it in bookshops. I have an identified target audience. I have a sponsor. There's a deal made with the sponsor that he takes 100 because he wants to distribute this or whatever he wants to do, and you keep the revenue from the sale of the balance. But a focused affair, and everybody can attempt it in time. Build your contacts, have confidence in your subject, do research, and it should sell, man.
Okay, thank you very much. If we've run out of time, if anybody has questions, please approach the authors, have a one-on-one session and pick their heads. They will give you lots of advice.